First up is Nathan, and yeah, it's a good design. I think it's the right kind of idea for sort of scope for this assignment because it's a limited area. It's not, some vast landscape where there'd be a huge amount to do, and there's some repetition, which is always good. For example, if you build this chair, you just duplicate it for that chair. If you build this half of the console, you might be able to just mirror it for that half. If you build one screen, you could just duplicate, 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 change the scale and size, and just rotate and move it all over. So it it's the right it's the right idea. So I think this could work. I think I could give you more credit if you did something that was your own artwork rather than just posting something you found on the internet. Um, but it would be a good design to work from. And I can see you've already started modeling, and we're not quite ready to get into this, but it's good that you're already starting on that. Next up is K, and I wasn't able to open this file. I tried downloading it. It seems to be missing the file extension. I tried just adding JPEG on there, but it wouldn't open, so I didn't know what this was. Um, so anyway, yeah, I like that you've added some nice reference images. I think that this is a good kind of environment to do. One challenge is the fact that it's sort of an open air design, means that you need to do the environment around it. So you just you want to make some decisions to limit the work you're doing to make sure you kind of have a limited range of camera angles that you'll use, and you only need to build and fill in the areas that will be seen by those range of cameras. But it's good drawing, good design work, nice references, and it is the right kind of idea for this class, and I think it's doable in the time that we have. So yeah, nice work on this. Next up is Jesse, and yeah, it's good that you've got a few details in here. I think what's missing is sort of kind of the the scope of the environment you want to do. Mario is that sort of side-scrolling type game usually, so um, unless this version of it's fully 3D. But anyway, yeah, I mean you've got some of the details in there, but what I'm curious about is sort of what section of environment you're going to actually build, and find a way to sort of limit it so it's not this kind of infinite expanse, but rather just a small area. So that's something to think about. Um, oh, unless it's literally just what we see here. But then, yeah, you sort of have that infinite expanse of sky and stuff, which isn't really necessarily the end of the world, but it's good if you can do stuff to kind of have sort of boundary or limits, like a wall or the side of a hill or something that kind of blocks off the background a bit, so you have sort of a limited area that you have to worry about modeling. So that's something to think about. Next up is Julie, and yeah, I mean it's good that you're sort of thinking through camera angles here, but for an environment design I would kind of pull back a little bit and sort of show the full range of the bedroom that you might use, and kind of what's on the wall. Are there pictures on the wall? Is there windows? Is there anything else on the floor? Those kinds of things. So I think kind of pulling back a little bit and showing the area, preferably kind of from a straight on view. I think it's good to have these reference images for the idea of what you want the furniture to look like, and that'll be really helpful to get that front and side image for modeling. That's a pretty simple image, and I would encourage you to use stuff that has more detail on it, just to kind of inspire you of what you might fill in the room with. you know so it can be pretty simple, but I think that think of the details in the environment that would tell us who this character is. Are they clean or messy? What kind of life do they have? Do they live alone? Do they live with somebody else? Um, what era is it? Modern? Is it in the past? You can, if you add a few more details, you can kind of provide the audience with answers to some of these questions. Next up is Natalie, and yeah, I mean, a hallway is usable. It's a little tricky sometimes in that it really limits the camera positions that you can use, because it's just so narrow, and you can't really do something from the side because the camera sort of won't fit in the space with the characters. So if you want to do this sort of hotel hallway thing, what you might think about is choosing an area where it kind of opens up into a larger area like you'd find near the elevators or something like that. Sometimes there's a kind of a more open area, maybe it has a window or something like that. So you can include like some hallway and some of the open area, and that might be a little bit better. I think that it's good that you have a reference image, but I would encourage you to have more reference images, kind of a drawing of what you're planning to do, and sort of just put a little bit more time in the planning and thinking of it and what you want to do. But I just caution that a hallway, well, it just doesn't leave you much room to move. So you might think of it could include a hallway, but maybe it includes, like I said, a larger area as well. Next up is Candice, and we have a sort of like a hut with, I think, some sort of grass or shades here. And there's a good reference image here as well, which is a bit different, but I guess it's the same idea. It looks like what's that, large bamboo poles and open air walls, and yeah, I mean that would make for a pretty interesting environment. Again, you sort of run into this issue of dealing with this kind of infinite landscape, and I'm encouraging you guys to find a way to not have an infinite landscape to have to build. So maybe rather than being what this looks like at the kind of a top of a hill or something like that, if you could have it lower down, and maybe maybe the land moves up behind it and there's just a set of trees. So think about limiting kind of the camera angles you'll use, and see how you can kind of block off some of the background so you don't have to deal with a very large environment. uh, and just keep it simple. But I think it's an interesting reference image, and it's good source to use. And it gives you kind of some very clear idea about what materials this is made out of, and the style, colors, all that stuff. So I think that's going to help be very useful to drive your creative decisions. Next up is Anton, and yeah, I mean this is good. You've kind of jumped ahead, but that's not a bad thing. Um, and yeah, I've seen you start to build the environment. It'd be great to have some reference, either sketches or some reference images of sort of what you're going for, and that can help sort of inform the detail that you want to have in there. It looks like you're using booleans, and they're sort of inherently problematic. They kind of make this weird topology that sometimes causes things to break, and so I'm not a big fan of booleans. Rather, what I like, let's say you wanted to cut a window into this, I would use the multi-cut tool. So you can go to Mesh Tools, Multi-Cut, or use the hotkey Control Shift X. And if I hold down the Control key, I get this line, and you can see it kind of slices through the whole thing. So you can do things like cut your windows and stuff out like so. And if you want to punch a hole in this thing, let me B for get rid of my soft select. And it just makes for a cleaner surface. I mean, you have these, everything's in quads on the surface, that is four-sided faces, rather than having these weird diagonal lines. And if I want to, fix up the inside, I could select these two sides here and do shift right mouse click and then bridge. Oh, that didn't want to. Oh yeah, that worked. And then just repeat for this. Shift right mouse click, bridge. You see it's building those inside surface where here there's a hole in there. This one, that one, shift right mouse click, bridge. And then there's a trick if you're repeating the same thing over and over, the same command, you can just use G. So I can do G and it'll do the most recent command. And so that, can you see how this makes sort of this cleaner sort of surface topology than that does with the strange, diagonal line cutting through the whole thing. And these weird, you tend to want to avoid these sort of many-sided faces like this one where it's like got all these different edges. So, but anyway, yeah, it's a good start. And yeah, we get some photo reference so we can, or maybe some sketches so we can see what you're going for. This is Shelly. Yeah, I think you've got an interesting room here with a lot of elements. It's a good photo. The drapes are interesting. You've got candelabras, a couch. There's lots of foreground objects, and there's all this detail here. However, in your drawing, I think we lose a lot of what made that nice and interesting. Things like the drapes, the couch, some of the detail, and you have a really massive bookshelf. What I would do is try to draw more inspiration from your photograph and kind of put in some more of those interesting details, and then you could kind of maybe scale back on the bookshelf a little bit. Yeah, and so just try to enrich this with more detail and more, draw more inspiration from the photo. And I think you'll have a much better design for an environment. But overall, this would be a useful space for a character to be in, so generally it works. The idea of doing the interior of a room is the right idea because it's limited, but I think that you could just do more with to make it interesting. Next up is Shun, and yeah, this looks good. I like the kind of detail of the potions in the cauldron. I would argue that typically a cauldron is over a fire, like in the reference image you pulled from the internet. So I would say that where this is kind of pressed up against the wall, there wouldn't be space for a fire, so it's kind of weird right under this sort of medicine cabinet looking thing, and the space is very kind of cramped and narrow for a character to be able to move around in. So I would expand the set a little bit, give yourself a little bit more space to work in, and kind of think about how the cauldron's integrated and what you might use it for. I think the reference image you downloaded, if it'll load. I don't know why it's saying publish. Yeah, it's a good image. It's got a good color scheme, and again, you see there's fire underneath it. It's a bit strange to me to have a fire on a wooden floor, so that might be something else you want to work out. But yeah, but good kind of colors and contrast, and it's a good resource for kind of style and design as you continue to work out your scene. But just make sure there's space for the character to work and interact within the scene. I really like all the this is Warren, by the way. I really like all the backstory and research behind this one. It's a really interesting and unique concept here, something I haven't seen before. Can't really see much there, but glass of tea, single tin tray. Yeah, I might, it's a little bit one-dimensional, like there's just one flat wall. Maybe you can do like at least either 2 or 3 walls, I would say. Like so you can get a corner and a little bit more room to move the camera. And think of what other additional objects you can populate it. I kind of like the sort of broken concrete exposing the bricks. Maybe you can get some more areas of that, so it's not just in the one spot. Yeah, that's good. I like the texture reference for the broken concrete. Yeah, interesting. So lots of good reference images. I think you could kind of flesh out the space a little bit more. Think of, populate it with a bit more, sort of objects and yeah, really interesting, very different. It's good stuff. This is William, and yeah, I think this is a pretty good, interesting choice for a scene. I think it's got a lot of forms and shapes to it. I like that it's an enclosed area, so you don't have that problem of kind of filling in some massive background, but it still provides sufficient room for the character to move and things for it to interact with. So I think that's good. You mentioned kind of aging it more, and I think that's a good idea. And then also, you might look into what more you could add to it. Maybe there's, sort of additional debris or something that kind of gives the space a little bit more story. Like think about what might have just happened before we enter the scene. But yeah, I think it's a good choice, and I saw you already started in Maya. So I can see you've already started here, and I think the way you've done it is okay. Um, I would, I think I would tend to want to make this, just one continuous surface going up rather than a series of intersecting cubes. But it really doesn't matter. That's fine. That's not. I don't see that causing any problem. So yeah, this works well, and I think from here you can kind of keep adding detail, the payphone as you mentioned, and some of the other objects, and then try to see what you can do to like age it. One thing that's nice to do, even on surfaces that have relatively sharp corners, is to bevel them. So shift right mouse click, and where is my bevel? Oh, do I have to? Maybe I have to select the edges. I think there's bevel in here somewhere. Huh, maybe not. I might have to just select the edges. So shift right mouse click, edge, and let me select those edges. And now shift right mouse click and bevel edge. And obviously that's way too much, but then if I decrease this fraction here, and you end up with that, and I'll turn off wireframe unshaded, and it just a little bevel gives it a little bit more, makes it look a little bit more real when there's that edge. You could increase, if I had T, I can increase the segments, but it's probably not that necessary for just a step. But you see how it gives it that rounded edge, and that just, I don't know, it makes things look less like kind of computery geometric, and to have a slightly beveled edge like that. And then from there you can go in and kind of put some alterations and damage to make things a little imperfect. But beveling is a nice way to go to help with make things less computery looking.